Okay, in this lesson we're going to learn how to work through dividing when we have polynomials and monomials. Now we've done this before, and this is really review from Unit 1, but there might be some things in here that you don't remember. So let's take a look at just some of the questions. So let's start with question C. And so we'll zoom in, and let's start with question C and work through what we're supposed to do. Okay, we're dividing the top by the bottom. And what we're going to do here is we're going to start with the numbers, and we're going to work through the numbers and figure out what they would be if we were dividing, and then worry about the letters. So remember, we're just looking at the numbers, and then we'll look at each individual letter. So when I do the numbers, negative 12 divided by 3, I think what times 3 will equal 12? It'll be 4. And remember that you have a negative in front, so you'd have negative 4. Then what you've got to do is work with each letter. So I'm going to start with the M's. The M's, you have 1 up top, and a good thing to do is write your exponents on your letters. So M1 and N1, and on the bottom is also N1. And ask yourself, if I'm just looking at the M's, what would happen? Now there is nothing on the bottom for the M's, so nothing's going to really happen to the top, so it would stay the same. So it'd stay as M1. But for the second one, with the N's, we've got 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom, and we're going to subtract the exponents. Because when we divide, when we talk about powers, we would always subtract the exponents. So really it's going to be n1 minus 1. So if I rewrote this, it would be negative 4 m1 n to the 0. Now really what n to the 0 means is that I don't have any n's left. So do I really have to write that? No, it's a waste of time. Just write it as negative 4m1, or you can just write that as negative 4m. And that's your answer. Okay, let's take a look at another question here. Let's look about maybe the last one, H. And we'll zoom in here and we'll kind of work through this question so we have more space. Okay, this one, same thing, work with the numbers. So I'm going to look at 36 and negative 6 first and divide. So what times 6 will be 36? Will be 6. And I've got 1 negative left, so it'll be negative 6. Then work with the x's. So I've got 3 x's here and 2 x's there. And because I'm dividing the top by the bottom, I'm subtracting the exponents. So I'm going to go x 3 minus 2. Then do the same for the y's. I've got 2 up here and 2 down there. So I'd have y 2 minus 2. And if I rewrote this, you would get negative 6, x1, y0. And just like we mentioned before, we don't really have to write y0. We don't have any left. So you can rewrite this as negative 6x1 or just negative 6x. And that's your answer. Okay. On to the next part. Now this may look more complicated, but it's exactly the same thing. And we'll look at question C here. Oh, let's undo that. If we can. Okay, let's just try zooming in. It's not letting me erase it. Okay, let's take a look at question C. Just because you have 3 things on the top and there's 1 thing on the bottom, there isn't going to be really anything that's going to be different here. And so what I'm going to do is take a look just at each individual one. So I'm going to work just with this one, then I'm going to work with that one, and then I'm going to work with that one. So we're going to think about each term as one thing. And remember, the negative sign that's in front is attached to that number that's to the right of it. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which would be this one. It's going to divide by the bottom. Then the second one's going to divide by the bottom, and then finally the third one's going to divide by the bottom. So we have to deal with each one at a time. So let's start with the first one. And it's going to divide by the bottom. So I go 14 divided by 7, and I get 2. And there's 3 b's up top, or b to the power 3, but none down on the bottom, so the b's stay the same. Then I move on to the next one. I have negative 21 b squared divided by 7. So I do negative 21 divided by 7. And I get 21 divided by 7 is 3. but I have a negative left over, so I write negative in front. And there's b squared up top, but nothing on the bottom, so the b squares are going to stay the same. And then for the last one, you go 7 divided by 7 is positive 1, and you've got a b up top, so you would just have b. And that's your answer. Now you can't add up like terms here because b cubed is different from b squared, which is different from b. So that's your answer. Okay, let's move on to the next part, and you can solve the rest of these questions on your own using what I've shown you for that example. Okay, on this part, this is pretty much exactly the same thing. You just have to deal with an extra letter on the bottom, so nothing's different here. So let's take a look at the very first one, which would be A. And I don't like the way they've shown it in the example guide here. Just ignore it and do it the way that I'm going to show you. So let's just ignore this part here. Waste of time. Let's do it my way. And what we're going to do is think about each part. That part's going to divide, that part's going to divide, and that part's going to divide. So you're going to have 3 answers here. So let's look at the first one. We have 5x cubed divided by 5x to the power of 1. So the first thing you're going to do is go 5 divided by 5, which is not 0. 5 divided by 5 will be 1. I'll put my answer down at the bottom here. And I'm going to have x to the power of 3 divided by x to the power of 1. So really write out the work. They're subtracting the exponents. And I'm going to get 1x squared. The next thing I've got to do is go positive 10 divided by 5, and I get positive 2. But remember, I'm also going to have to do x squared divided by x1. So I'm also going to have subtraction here, so it's going to be x to the power of 1. And then the last one. Remember that it's not just 15, it's the whole thing. It's negative 15. So I should do the whole negative 15 divided by 5. 15 divided by 5 will give me 3. And because there's a negative still there, you get negative. Now, up top, this is really x to the power of 1 and x to the power of 1 on the bottom. So x1 divided by x1 will be 1 minus 1. You'll get x to the 0. So I don't really have to write x to the 0 here. I don't even have to write it. I can just write negative 3. So that's going to be your answer. It's going to be 1x squared plus 2x to the power 1 minus 3. Or you could just simply write it like x squared plus 2x minus 3. Either way would be correct.